There's a kind of peace this world can't give you, a peace that doesn't come from money, applause, or having everything figured out. It's the kind of peace that shows up when life is falling apart, when the weight of everything should be breaking you, but somehow you're still standing. That's not just strength, that's God working through you. You see, when you're growing closer to God, the storm doesn't always stop. But you stop letting the storm control you. The same problems might still be there. The bills, the heartbreak, the uncertainty, they don't just disappear overnight. But something inside you changes. You're no longer waking up anxious, checking your phone, chasing the next fix to distract you from the pain. Instead, you're learning how to be still. You're learning how to trust. That kind of peace can't be bought. It can't be faked. It's not something you learn in books or pick up from motivational videos. It only comes when you truly surrender, when you realize that your strength was never enough to carry this weight in the first place. There was a time you would have lost your mind in this situation, a time when you'd be calling everybody, venting, breaking down, trying to figure out how to fix everything on your own. But now you're different. You're learning that silence is power. You're learning that every battle isn't yours to fight. You're finally understanding that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let go and let God. When you're growing closer to God, people around you will notice before you do. They'll see how you're handling things differently. They might not even understand it. They'll ask, how are you so calm? How are you not losing your mind? And you won't even have the perfect answer. All you'll know is, it's not you, it's Him. That peace isn't something you manufacture. It doesn't come from positive thinking or pretending you're okay. It comes from knowing deep down that even if everything falls apart, God is still holding you together. It comes from trusting that His plan is greater than your pain, even when you can't see how the pieces are going to fit. There will be nights when you cry yourself to sleep, days when the burden feels too heavy, but there's something different now. The tears still fall, but they don't break you like they used to. You wake up in the morning with strength you know it didn't come from you. That's how you know you're growing. That's how you know He's working. The world will tell you that peace comes when everything falls into place, but God's peace shows up when everything is falling apart. It's the kind of peace that makes no sense. It's the kind of peace that will confuse the people around you, because the same storm that should have destroyed you is the storm God is using to build you. This peace isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with fireworks or grand moments. Sometimes it's just a quiet whisper in your heart reminding you. Sometimes it's the strength to get out of bed when everything in you wants to give up. Sometimes it's the courage to smile through the pain. When you're growing closer to God, your life doesn't suddenly become easier, but your spirit becomes stronger. The storm doesn't get smaller, but you get bigger. You stop praying for God to take the storm away and start praying for Him to give you the strength to walk through it. Because now you understand the storm isn't there to break you, it's there to build you. The world is loud, fear is loud, anxiety is loud, but God moves in the quiet places. When you choose to trust Him in the storm, you're making a statement to the enemy that says, I don't have to see the whole picture to know God is working. That peace is a gift, but it's a gift that comes through process, through surrender, through breaking. And if you're feeling that peace right now, don't mistake it for weakness. It's the evidence that you're growing. It's the proof that God is taking you to another level. Peace doesn't mean the storm stops. Peace means you stop letting the storm stop you. There comes a moment in life when something inside you starts to shift. The things that used to excite you don't move you the same way anymore. The conversations that used to fill your time now feel empty. The places you used to run to for pleasure leave you feeling drained instead of fulfilled. That's not boredom, it's growth. That's not losing yourself, it's finding who you're really meant to be. When you're growing closer to God, your appetite starts to change. You start craving something deeper. What used to satisfy you no longer feels enough. The parties, the attention, the quick highs, they don't hit the way they used to, because God is pulling you into something higher. He's waking up a hunger inside you that no amount of pleasure can ever satisfy. At first it feels uncomfortable. You might not even understand it. You look around at the same crowd, the same habits, the same distractions, and something in your spirit whispers, there's more. It's not that you're judging the people around you. It's not that you're better than anyone else. But when God starts calling you, He separates you. He makes certain things feel heavy because they don't fit who you're becoming. You can fight it. You can try to run back to the familiar. You can force yourself to laugh at the jokes you don't find funny anymore, or fake the smiles in places you know you're not supposed to be. But deep down, you feel the difference. Deep down, you know you're outgrowing what used to entertain you. That's God protecting your destiny. He's breaking your attachment to what's comfortable so He can pull you into what's purposeful. You might lose some friends in this process. You might feel isolated because not everyone is going to understand your transformation. The people who love the old version of you might not know how to handle the new version that's trying to emerge. They might call you boring. They might say you've changed, and they're right. You have changed. But what they don't see is that you're not just losing interest. You're gaining purpose. Purpose has a different appetite. It doesn't crave what feels good in the moment. It craves what builds something eternal. Purpose makes you ask questions you never used to ask. Why am I here? What's my assignment? What does God want from my life? Those questions will keep you up at night. They will pull you away from the crowd. They will make you feel misunderstood. But that's the price of transformation. When you're growing closer to God, the distractions that used to consume your time start feeling like a trap. You start protecting your peace. You start craving stillness. You might not even know what to pray, but you're drawn to God's presence. You're drawn to truth. Your spirit is tired of the temporary. The world will try to pull you back. It'll try to convince you that you're missing out. It'll dangle everything you used to love right in front of you just to see if you'll bite. But something in you won't let you go back. Even if you try, it won't feel the same, because once God starts calling you, nothing else will satisfy you again. It's not always a loud process. Sometimes it's subtle. The music you used to love doesn't hit the same. The conversations you used to engage in now feel draining. The people you used to seek validation from no longer have that power over you. Little by little, God starts breaking your attachment to everything that was never meant to define you. It's not rejection, it's redirection. He's stripping away the things that could distract you from the calling He's placed on your life. And yes, it will be lonely at times. Yes, you'll question if you're making the right choice. But deep down, there's a peace that keeps pulling you forward, a knowing that you're right where you're supposed to be. Don't fight that hunger. Don't try to fill it with things you know aren't meant for you anymore. That hunger is a gift. That hunger is God preparing you for the life you've been praying for. He's teaching you that your purpose can't be found in the crowd. It can only be found in Him. Pleasure feels good for a moment, but purpose will fill you for a lifetime. When you're growing closer to God, you'll feel the difference between being entertained and being fulfilled. And once you've tasted that fulfillment, you'll never settle for empty pleasures again. This hunger is the sign you're becoming who God created you to be. Let the old cravings die. Let the old habits fall away. You're not missing out. You're leveling up. You're not losing yourself. You're finding the version of you that was always hidden beneath the noise. Purpose is calling, and only the hungry will answer. Growth will always come with discomfort. It's the silent proof that you're moving forward. There was a time when you could do certain things without thinking twice. You could live in cycles, entertain distractions, or compromise your standards, and it didn't bother you. But now, something feels different. What used to feel normal now feels heavy. The conversations you used to enjoy, the habits you used to justify, they don't sit right with your spirit anymore. That's not guilt, that's conviction. Conviction is God's way of pulling you higher. It's not there to shame you, it's there to shape you. It's the voice inside you whispering, you're better than this. It's the nudge that stops you mid-sentence when you're about to gossip. It's the weight in your chest when you're about to fall back into something He already delivered you from. It's not punishment, it's protect. God is making you uncomfortable in places where you don't belong anymore. Conviction will break your heart before it saves your life. It'll make you wrestle with yourself. It'll make you question why you're feeling things you never used to feel. You might even wish you could go back to the days when you could sin without thinking twice, when you could numb yourself to the consequences. But the fact that you're feeling it now is the evidence that God is working. He loves you too much to let you stay the same. He loves you too much to let you get comfortable in what's beneath your calling. Conviction is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront the version of yourself that's still clinging to the old life. It exposes the patterns you've been protecting, the habits you've been hiding behind, the parts of you that are afraid to grow. It would be easier to ignore it. It would be easier to numb yourself, turn up the music, drown out the whispers, pretend you don't feel the shift happening inside you. But ignoring conviction only delays your destiny. The longer you fight it, the heavier it will feel, because God isn't trying to ruin your life. He's trying to rebuild it. Conviction will separate you from what you prayed for deliverance from. It'll make you uncomfortable in the very places you used to find. You'll start noticing how draining certain conversations are, how toxic certain relationships have always been, how empty the habits you've been holding on to really are. And once God opens your eyes, you can't unsee what He shows you. There will be moments when you'll try to silence that voice. You'll tell yourself you're overthinking. You'll try to convince yourself that you're being too hard on yourself. But deep down, you know the truth. That's not your mind playing tricks on you. That's God transforming you. Conviction is a sign that you're outgrowing the version of yourself that settled for less. The same habits that used to satisfy you now feel beneath you because they are. You're not better than anyone else, but you're better than the patterns that have been holding you back. You're better than the lies you've been telling yourself. You're better than the comfort zone that's been robbing you of your purpose. People around you might not understand why you're changing. They might say you're acting different, and they're right. You're not who you used to be. You're starting to feel the weight of your calling. You're starting to see that you can't carry your purpose and your comfort zone at the same time. Conviction is God's way of asking, do you want temporary comfort or eternal transformation? Because you can't have both. You can't pray for breakthrough and still hold on to the things that are breaking you. You can't ask God to elevate you while you're still entertaining the same distractions that are keeping you small. It will hurt to let go. It will hurt to break those cycles. It will hurt to separate from what feels familiar. But that pain is proof that you're breaking free. God isn't asking you to let go to punish you. He's asking you to let go so He can fill your hands with something greater. Conviction isn't weakness. It's spiritual strength waking up inside you. It's your spirit refusing to settle for less. The enemy wants you to believe you're losing yourself, but you're not. You're finally becoming who God always meant for you to be. The discomfort won't last forever, but the transformation will. Oh, if you're feeling the weight of conviction right now, don't run from it. Lean into it. Let it stretch you. Let it break you out of every cycle that was never meant to hold you. Conviction is a gift. It's the proof that God hasn't given up on you. And if He's still convicting you, that means He's still calling you. That means there's still more inside you. That means He's not finished writing your story yet. Don't fear the weight. Embrace it. Because the same conviction that's breaking you right now is the same conviction that's building you into everything God created you to be. Forgiveness is one of the hardest tests you'll face when you're growing closer to God. It's not just about letting go of what they did. It's about releasing the hold it has on your heart. When someone breaks you, when they betray your trust or leave scars you never asked for, everything in you wants to hold on to that pain. You feel justified in your anger. You replay the conversations, the moments, the hurt, because somehow it feels like if you let it go, you're letting them off the hook. But forgiveness isn't about setting them free. It's about setting you free. When God starts working on your heart, he begins by breaking the chains you can't see, the grudges, the bitterness, the silent wars you're still fighting on the inside. You don't always realize how heavy that weight is until he starts asking you to lay it down. At first, you'll resist. You'll tell yourself you're over it, that you've moved on. But the mention of their name still makes your chest tighten. The thought of them still stirs something in you that shouldn't be there. That's how you know there's still work to be done. Forgiveness isn't a feeling, it's a decision. It's waking up every day and choosing to release what tried to break you. It's choosing to believe that even the people who hurt you are still a part of God's plan. It's understanding that holding on to bitterness won't change what happened, but it will change who you're becoming. God isn't asking you to forgive because they deserve it. He's asking you to forgive because you deserve to be free. Unforgiveness is a prison you build with your own hands. Every grudge is another brick. Every memory you replay is another chain. And the truth is, half the people you're holding on to aren't even thinking about you. They've moved on. They're living their life while you're still carrying the weight of what they did. Forgiveness is the only way to break free from that prison. But don't get it twisted. It's not easy. It will stretch you. It'll break your pride. It'll force you to confront wounds you've been trying to bury. Sometimes the hardest part of forgiveness is realizing you'll never get the apology you deserve. You'll never hear them say they're sorry. You'll never get an explanation for why they did what they did. And that's when you realize forgiveness isn't about what they say. It's about what God is saying to you. He's saying, trust me to handle what they did to you. He's saying, let me heal what they broke. Forgiveness doesn't mean what they did was okay. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life. It means you're choosing your peace over your pain. It means you're choosing your future over your past. It means you're refusing to let what they did rob you of the joy God is trying to give you. There will be days when you'll forgive them in the morning and feel the anger rise back up by nightfall. That's part of the process. Forgiveness isn't always one big moment. Sometimes it's 1,000 little choices. Every time you feel that bitterness creeping back in, you have to lay it back down at God's feet. God can't fill a heart that's full of bitterness. He can't pour blessings into hands that are still holding on to grudges. That's why forgiveness isn't just for them, it's for the next level He's trying to take you to. Some doors won't open until you forgive. Some prayers won't be answered until you release what you've been carrying. If you're serious about growing closer to God, forgiveness isn't optional, it's necessary. But don't expect the process to feel good. Forgiveness will humble you. It'll make you pray for people you never thought you'd pray for. It'll force you to show grace to people who would never show it to you. And that's how you know you're growing, when you can wish them well even after they broke you. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's power. It's looking at the person who hurt you and saying, you don't have the power to control my heart anymore. It's breaking the cycle that tried to break you. It's choosing to be free when every part of your flesh wants to stay bound. God sees the tears you've cried. He knows the nights you've wrestled with the pain. But He also knows the destiny on your life is too big for you to carry unforgiveness into your future. What they did might have delayed you, but it can't destroy you. Not if you let God heal you. If you'd like to find God, lead you astride. If you'd like to stand in His strength, you don't have to wait for an apology. You don't have to wait for them to change. You don't have to wait for them to understand how bad they hurt you. The moment you decide to forgive, that's the moment you take your power back. Forgiveness isn't forgetting what happened. It's choosing not to let what happened define you anymore. It's looking at your scars and saying, this hurt me, but it didn't break me. It's trusting that God can take what they meant to harm you and use it to strengthen you. If you're feeling that pull in your spirit right now, the nudge to let go, don't ignore it. That's God inviting you into freedom. That's God preparing your heart for the next level. The pain might not disappear overnight, But if you keep choosing forgiveness, one day you'll wake up and realize the weight is gone. You were never meant to carry this burden. It's time to release what broke you so God can rebuild you. When you're growing closer to God, one of the clear signs is how your desires start to change. What you crave, what you chase, what keeps you up at night, it all starts to shift. The things that used to consume your mind don't hold the same weight anymore. The validation you once sought from people starts to lose its grip on you. The attention, the applause, the approval, it feels empty now because God is rewiring your heart to crave something greater. At first, you won't even notice the shift. It happens slowly, almost quietly. One day you're chasing after things that used to excite you, and the next you're wondering why they don't satisfy you anymore. That's how God works. He doesn't force you. He transforms you. He starts breaking your appetite for what was never meant to feed you. You'll start feeling that nudge in your spirit, that pull towards something higher. Suddenly, the things that once distracted you start feeling like noise. The conversations you used to enjoy now feel shallow. The habits you used to defend now feel heavy. It's not because you're better than anyone. It's because God is calling you deeper. You'll feel the tension between who you used to be and who you're becoming, the battle between your old cravings and your new hunger. And in that space, you'll have a choice. Go back to what feels familiar or step into what God is trying to birth in you. The world will try to pull you back. It'll try to convince you that you're missing out, that you're becoming too serious, too spiritual, too different. But deep down, you know the truth. You're not missing out. You're being set apart. God is protecting you from distractions disguised as opportunities. He's closing doors that would have kept you bound. There was a time when you craved attention from people, when you lived for the likes, the comments, the validation. But now you're craving His presence. You used to pray for more money, more success, more influence. But now you're praying for wisdom, clarity, and peace. You used to run to people to fill your voids. Now you're learning how to sit in God's presence and let Him fill the empty places in your heart. That shift isn't something you can force. It's something God does inside of you when you're ready. And the proof that you're growing is when you start wanting what He wants, even when it doesn't make sense. When you start praying for His will instead of your own. When you start surrendering your plans, your timeline, your desires, because you finally realized His way is better. You'll start craving time with Him more than time with the crowd. You'll start valuing your peace more than fitting in. The things you used to run to when you were empty, relationships, distractions, temporary highs, won't satisfy you anymore, because once you've tasted God's presence, nothing else will ever be enough. This process will isolate you at times. You won't always understand why you're losing interest in what used to excite you. You might feel out of place around certain people. You might wonder why you can't enjoy the same things everyone else seems to love. But that's the price of transformation. God isn't taking things away from you. He's making room for something better. Desires don't just disappear, they're replaced. God isn't asking you to let go of your old cravings to leave you empty. He's shifting your appetite so He can fill you with something eternal. The more time you spend in His presence, the more your heart will start to crave what aligns with His purpose for your life. There will be moments when you miss the old life, when you wonder if you're making the right decision, when the enemy will try to whisper, you were happier back then. But that's a lie. You weren't happier. You were just distracted. You weren't full. You were numbed. And now God is waking up something in you that can't be numbed anymore. The closer you get to God, the more your desires will reflect His heart. You'll start craving what He craves, peace over chaos, purpose over pleasure, alignment over attention. Your prayers will shift from God, give me what I want, to God, give me what you want for me. That kind of surrender isn't always easy. It will cost you your pride. It will cost you your comfort. It will cost you your timeline. But what you'll gain in return is worth every sacrifice. Peace that can't be shaken, joy that doesn't depend on circumstances, and a purpose that will outlive you. This hunger you're feeling, this pull towards something greater, it's not random. It's God calling you to another level. Don't fight it. Don't try to fill it with what used to satisfy you. Let Him break your old cravings. Let Him give you a new appetite. You're not crazy for outgrowing what used to excite you. You're not weird for craving more. You're not losing your mind. You're finding your purpose. This is what transformation feels like. It's uncomfortable, it's lonely, and it's necessary. God is setting your heart on fire for the very thing He created you for. Let Him burn away every desire that was never meant to be yours. Let Him birth a new hunger in you, because the closer you get to Him, the less you'll crave what was never meant to fill you. You're not being left behind. You're being called higher. You're not missing out. You're being set apart. You're not losing your desires. You're gaining His. And what God wants for you will always be greater than anything you could ever want for yourself. When you're growing closer to God, one of the most powerful signs is how your faith starts to stretch. It's not the kind of faith that comes easy. It's the kind that gets tested in the dark. The kind of faith that doesn't need proof to believe. Anybody can have faith when everything is working out, when prayers are being answered, when the path is clear. But real faith shows up when heaven goes silent. When you're praying and nothing is changing, when you're asking God for direction and all you hear is stillness, that's when God starts stretching you. That's when He teaches you how to trust Him even when you can't trace Him. Faith isn't built in comfort, it's built in uncertainty. God will let you walk through seasons where everything around you is shaking just to show you the only foundation that never moves is Him. He'll allow certain doors to close so you'll learn how to trust His timing. He'll allow certain prayers to go unanswered so you'll learn how to trust His wisdom. You won't always understand why He's making you wait. You won't always see what He's doing behind the scenes. But if you keep trusting Him in the silence, you'll start to realize the wait isn't punishment, it's preparation. God isn't holding you back. He's holding you together. Faith will break you before it builds you. It will strip away everything you thought you needed until all you're left with is God. And that's exactly where He wants you. Because when God is all you have, you'll finally realize He's all you ever needed. There will be nights when you'll wrestle with doubt, when you'll question if you really heard God right, when you'll wonder if you're wasting your time believing for something that seems impossible. But the fact that you're still holding on, even with tears in your eyes, that's faith. Faith isn't the absence of doubt. It's choosing to trust God in spite of the doubt. You might not feel strong, but the very fact that you're still believing is proof that God's hand is on your life. If He gave you the vision, He'll give you the provision. If He planted the promise in your heart, He will bring it to pass. On His time, not yours. The delay isn't denial, it's divine alignment. Faith will make you look crazy to the world. It'll have you building an ark when there's not a cloud in the sky. It'll have you walking away from opportunities that don't align with your calling. It'll have you preparing for blessings before there's any evidence they're on the way. That's the kind of faith God is trying to birth in you, the kind that believes before it sees. God isn't testing your faith to break you. He's testing it to reveal what's really inside of you. Anybody can shout when the walls come down, but can you still worship while you're walking around in circles? Anybody can praise Him when the breakthrough happens, but can you still trust Him while you're waiting in the middle? Faith isn't just believing that God can, it's trusting that God will even when He does. It's standing in front of closed doors and still declaring that God is good. It's facing heartbreak and still believing that God has a plan. It's praying the same prayer for months, for years, and still showing up with the same expectation because you know the God you're praying to isn't just able, He's faithful. The stretching will hurt. The waiting will break something in you. But that's how God increases your capacity. He's not just answering your prayers. He's building your character because what He's about to release into your life will require a different version of you. Faith will cost you your comfort zone. It'll cost you your timeline. It'll cost you your need for control. But what you'll gain in return is far greater, a peace that doesn't make sense, a strength you didn't know you had, and a trust that can't be shaken. When you're growing closer to God, your prayers will start to shift. You won't just pray for blessings, you'll pray for alignment. You won't just ask God to open doors, you'll ask Him to close the ones that aren't meant for you. You won't just pray for what you want, you'll pray for what He wants. That's when you'll know your faith is stretching, when you stop trying to fit God into your plans and start surrendering to His. It won't always make sense. You'll have moments when you'll feel forgotten, when you'll wonder if God is even listening, but He's closer than you think. The silence isn't rejection, it's God seeing if you'll trust Him even when you can't feel Him. The stretching isn't breaking you, it's making room for what you've been praying for. God is preparing you for what He promised you. The vision He's given you is bigger than you realize, and He's not just preparing the blessing, He's preparing you. If you're in a season where it feels like nothing is happening, don't give up. If you're praying and heaven feels silent, don't walk away. If you're believing for something that seems impossible, hold on. The stretching season always comes before the breakthrough. God is stretching your faith because He's about to fill your life with something you can't even imagine. What He's doing behind the scenes will make sense soon, but for now, just trust Him. Even when you can't see it, even when you don't feel it, even when everything in you wants to quit, faith is built in the waiting. Faith is built in the silence. Faith is built when you're walking through the valley with no evidence of the promise in sight. And if you're still holding on, if you're still believing, if you're still showing up, that's proof that God is working. Your faith is stronger than you realize. Your breakthrough is closer than you think. Don't let the stretching break you. Let it build you, because what God is about to release into your life will be worth every single moment you had to wait.